Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, you've brought us a set of sources that, frankly, feel like a conspiracy theory come to life. They detail a scenario so intricate and so cold.
It's a perfect storm, really.
It is. We are plunging into Bolton, South Dakota, a small, desolate town that just somehow becomes the absolute epicenter of this massive multi-layered crisis.
And when you say multi-layered, you're not kidding.
No, we're talking about a ruthless cartel boss known only as Plato, a hopelessly corrupt local police force, and a secret buried deep beneath the prairie that connects, of all things, Mexican organized crime to the peak of the Cold War.
It's a fascinating analysis of catastrophic institutional failure meeting pure global-scale criminality. And what makes this deep dive so compelling is that convergence.
Right.
On one side, you have this high-stakes organized crime Plato, this Mexican cartel feature whose ties, as our sources suggest, actually stretch across the globe. They specifically link to Russian dealers, which indicates a pretty diversified criminal portfolio.
So this isn't just a regional operation.
Not even close. And then on the other side, you have a local police department, the Bolton PD, that is effectively hobbled by this deeply flawed contract they have. It's called the crisis plan.
You'd definitely get into that.
And all of it is rooted in a bizarre, frankly shocking piece of military history. And the whole thing is playing out under this extremely tight, unforgiving timeline ticking down from 61 hours.
And our way into this whole isolated ecosystem is completely accidental. It's this character, Jack Reacher, a large transient man who, prefers to pay cash, who just lands right in the middle of this snowbound crisis.
Purely by chance.
Purely because his bus skidded off the road. So our mission today is to follow his deductive process step by step and analyze what each reveal tells us about the deeper structural failures and the true devastating scale of the conspiracy that was targeting this one principled local witness.
Exactly. We're not just, summarizing a plot here. We're really examining the levers of control. How does a global figure like Plato exploit the weaknesses that are just inherent in local governance? And how does a secret military project from the 1950s suddenly become a multi-billion-dollar asset in the 21st century? We really have to slow down and just digest the scale of this whole operation.
Okay, so let's start exactly where the clock starts. The source material is very precise, 5 minutes to 4 in the afternoon, with exactly 60 hours to go. And the opening scene, it just establishes this immediate sense of dread.
It really does.
We have this nervous, terrified lawyer visiting a prisoner. And the physical description of this prisoner it's unsettling. He's described as hairless, enormously overweight, marbled with fat, just a truly grotesque presence.
Yeah.
And they're in this stark, windowless concrete interview room.
And the description of that room is so important. It's where the immediate emotional context lies. It's built to be perfectly symmetrical, divided by this thick, slightly green safety glass and a concrete counter. It represents the binary world that the lawyer operates in. The source says he sees it as either you were locked up or you weren't. But the crucial point here is that while the prisoner is physically locked up, the lawyer, who is still free, is about to become psychologically imprisoned by the information he's about to receive.
And the method of communication is just chillingly efficient. The prisoner is described as docile, almost vacant. He doesn't have a conversation with the lawyer.
No, not at all. He just recites 14 separate criminal proposals completely from memory.
In this cold, mechanical, sing-song way.
Exactly, like a piece of recording equipment. And that mechanical recitation, that's Plato's genius for managing deniability. It ensures that no new information is generated in that room. It's just a relay of these pre-existing, carefully crafted commands.
The lawyer's just there to record it.
His job is simply to be a recording device himself. But as he's recording this monologue while driving away, we witness his immediate visceral terror. About 7 minutes into it, he recites what the source calls the most obviously naked and blunt and brutal and egregious of the 14 proposals into his cell phone.
And he's connecting to Plato's contact, who's described as having a coarse voice.
Right. And the sources describe that moment as the lawyer suffering a core moral spasm, just reciting the sheer brutality of the command, which we can infer involves murder. It literally jolts his shoulders.
Causes his hand to move on the steering wheel.
And he ends up in a clumsy skid on some bridge ice. He very narrowly misses colliding head-on with this massive white bus that's coming toward him through the snow.
That one phone call, then, that's what seals his fate.
Absolutely. It demonstrates that the moment the lawyer internalizes the knowledge and relays the command, he becomes a liability. Later on, when Plato orders the lawyer hit to break the chain, it just confirms that, in the cartel's view, knowledge itself is the weak link. The lawyer knew too much, and his reaction in the car proved he wasn't stable enough to hold that knowledge.
And this incident, this near miss, immediately transitions us to Reacher's entry point. Because that massive white bus the lawyer almost hit.
Reacher's on it.
Reacher is the rearmost passenger on it. The external environment now becomes the immediate threat.
Yeah.
A sudden, violent snowstorm.
And the storm is described as instantaneous and just overwhelming. The bus driver, a guy named Knox, is a 12-year veteran, highly skilled, and he fights that skid fiercely. But the sources note a luxury bus is a very unwieldy type of vehicle, and he loses the battle.
They end up in a deep ditch. And the context here is great. The passengers are this homogenous group of 20 white-haired seniors.
A Seattle church group.
A church group on their way to Mount Rushmore. Completely unprepared for this level of, isolation and cold.
And Reacher, who paid $30 for a ride to Rapid City, is in the back, so he feels the fishtailing the worst. But he immediately assesses the crisis. What really stands out in the sources is just how practical his response is.
Yeah, he notes the ditch is deep, and he runs through the snow to carry 2 injured women because the step down from the bus is just too much for them. Then he gives the crucial order.
Keep the heater running.
Exactly.
But that instruction just reveals the core problem, the immediate cold. The temperature is dropping like a stone, and Knox has to tell him he can't run the heater. The bus scraping the ditch likely cracked the fuel line.
So running the engine now risks a massive explosion.
Which is an incredible piece of foreshadowing for the end of our story. So Reacher's first task is just survival. Survival in the face of impossible cold and isolation. There's no traffic coming. They're completely cut off.
And he eventually catches a ride on, of all things, a prison transport vehicle. It's driven by the Deputy Chief, a man named Peterson. He is literally stepping right into the belly of the beast.
And the change in the environment is instant. They leave the highway, and they pass this brand new, shiny sign that reads, "Correctional facility ahead. Do not stop for hitchhikers."
Which Reacher apparently notes with displeasure. It's a symbol of the town's new character.
Yeah, it makes moving on in the morning a little harder. Bolton has expanded and been transformed into a prison town because of this brand new federal facility. And Peterson, to his credit, seems like a pretty effective, practical local cop.
He does. He arranges for the stranded seniors to be housed by local couples, replicating their motel paperwork in 13 knots, which is a nice little detail.
Very resourceful.
So once Reacher arrives in town, and he's waiting for the chief of police, a guy named Holland, we get a little tour of the local police structure. And Holland's office is, well, it's classic aging municipal decor.
Sloppy, thick paint, worn vinyl tile. You can picture it perfectly.
But Reacher, of course, focuses on the personal artifacts.
And those details are all psychological cues. There's a 10-year-old family portrait, Holland, his wife, and their daughter, which suggests a life that existed before the prison took over the town. But the most telling detail,
The dice.
the pair of worn bone dice on the desk, faded from age. They're a memento from the past indicating, what? Maybe a gambling habit? Or just a nostalgic link to a riskier life? It's the first real crack in the facade.
And Reacher immediately notes the bizarre schedule they're running. The police department is on an unusual 2-shift, 12-hour schedule, from 8:30 in the morning to 8:30 at night.
Which he deduces is indicative of short-term stress. It's a schedule you adopt when you know something massive is about to happen, but you can't say what it is.
Why would a small town suddenly adopt a system like that unless they were anticipating some major high-stakes operational requirement, something way beyond typical rural policing?
Exactly. And it's here that Reacher's powers of observation really pay off. The office is quiet, but he observes something Holland tried hard to hide.
He sees a reflection.
He sees a reflection of a crime scene photo through the window. It's a tiny detail, but it's everything.
And then over dinner, Peterson, who is clearly impressed but also pretty suspicious of Reacher, he reluctantly confirms it. Reacher saw crime scene photographs visible through Holland's window. The subject, a dead guy.
And Peterson confirms the crucial link. This dead man looks exactly like the bikers or tweakers, the crystal meth users that Reacher is about to encounter.
So this is our first major confirmation. Organized crime isn't coming to Bolton.
It is already operating in Bolton, and the local police have already had to deal with the deadly consequences. It sets the stage perfectly. The police force is either completely compromised or just desperately overwhelmed by a crisis they were never, ever equipped to handle.
Okay, so the narrative then takes us south again, 1,700 miles from that snowstorm, to the central architect of all this danger, Plato. And we need to stop and really analyze the source's description of him.
He's a fascinating character.
He's exceptionally short, 5'1" in elevator shoes, 4'11" without, and he's obsessed with clothes that fit him right out of the box.
Specifically, Brooks Brothers boys' clothes. And the reason is, he despises the small numbers that tailors would call out when they were measuring him.
It's the classic short man complex,
Yeah.
but just amplified by absolute criminal power. His small stature dictates his need for absolute immediate control.
He compensates for his physical scale with systemic efficiency. And that's why for Plato, obedience followed command the same way night followed day. There's just zero tolerance for any deviation or delay.
And you mentioned it earlier, but we need to dive into this geopolitical connection. The sources link Plato to Russian dealers. Why would a Mexican cartel boss focused on a rural South Dakota operation be connected to Russian organized crime?
Because of the product and diversification. While his primary business is south of the border, the sheer scale of the operation Plato is pulling off in Bolton, we're talking billions in unexpected assets. It requires international laundering and distribution networks.
He can't move it all himself.
No way. Russian organized crime has historically held significant control over European distribution channels, particularly for high-end, untraceable commodities, which, as we'll find out, the contents of this bunker absolutely are.
So he's using their expertise.
He's using their expertise and their reach to maximize this windfall and offload a product that is, frankly, too large for the domestic U.S. market to absorb all at once. It signals that this isn't just a regional drug bust, it's a global liquidity event for the cartel.
Which makes the vulnerability in Bolton even more catastrophic. Peterson, the deputy chief, he's the one who reveals the institutional flaw that's built into their municipal contract with the federal prison, the crisis plan.
And this is the institutional critique we really need to focus on. Bolton, like a lot of small towns, they competed fiercely to win that federal facility.
It was a huge economic lifeline, like winning a massive factory.
Absolutely. But that contract came with this disastrous, non-negotiable obligation. If the prison siren sounds for an escape, the entire Bolton PD force, all 60 officers, regardless of their shift or their location, they must immediately abandon their posts.
Abandon everything.
And deploy to a specific prearranged perimeter 1 mile out for an audited headcount.
An audited headcount. That detail is so critical.
It is. They have to comply to the letter to avoid federal supervision and the inevitable economic devastation that would follow if the federal government decided they failed. So the moment that siren goes off, Janet Salter, the only witness in town, is left completely undefended.
And that's the genius of Plato's plan. He doesn't need to break into the prison. He just needs to know about the system's external flaw.
And he has the power to trigger this whole scenario from 1,700 miles away. It's an operational failure just built into the DNA of the contract.
So Reacher, he's analyzing the massive size of the police station, the complete lockdown of the town with roadblocks, and he recognizes that the police are worried about someone coming in from the outside. But he quickly realizes the worry is misplaced.
Yeah, the threat isn't the prison population escaping. It's the external threat targeting the police force's commitment to that very contract.
And the immediate danger arrives, just as Reacher's riding with Holland out to the western suburbs. Holland confronts these two aggressive bikers.
Described as tall and heavyset and unkempt, dressed in black, the exact profile of the dead man that Reacher saw in the photos. These are the local tweakers who are distributing the product.
And Holland is visibly terrified, shivering, backed up against a snowbank. Peterson is frozen with worry, but Reacher just acts instantly.
He steps right into the confrontation. He notes that crystal meth users don't feel pain, but they do understand one thing: unconsciousness.
And he just quickly and brutally incapacitates them, using speed and leverage, and he protects Holland in the process.
And this initial intervention is so critical because it forces Holland, whether he likes it or not, to trust Reacher. And that allows Reacher to be assigned to the only true target in town, Janet Salter.
Let's discuss Salter. Reacher is assigned to protect this witness, a local, retired woman who is just, a person of unwavering principles. Her testimony isn't circumstantial, it's comprehensive.
She saw everything. I saw the conversation, I saw the inspection of the goods, I saw the counting and transfer of money. She is, as you said, a living deposition.
And her character really provides the moral anchor for this whole story. She actively rejects federal witness protection.
She argues fiercely, the bikers are the ones who should be locked up miles from home, not her. She sees her willingness to testify not as some fearful duty, but as a privilege. She wants to live out my principles and confront wickedness. She is walking the walk.
And she's not just principled, she's prepared. She's acquired a box of 100 rounds of ammunition and 2 antique revolvers.
Smith & Wesson military and police models from 1899 or 1902. The choice of weapon is fascinating. They're actually small for Reacher's hands. The sources remind us the average American male height in 1902 was 5 feet 7 inches, but they're reliable.
And Reacher checks them, oils them with her sewing machine oil, and brings these century-old pieces of technology back to peak function.
And then he gives her the most brutally efficient advice possible for self-defense. Put 6 rounds in the guy. Don't stop until the gun is empty.
So, with the witness secured, at least for the moment, Reacher's investigation shifts to the mysterious historical piece of this puzzle, the abandoned military facility 5 miles west of town. Peterson thinks it's just a massive meth lab.
But Reacher suspects something far deeper, and this is where his military background becomes indispensable. He needs data, and he needs it fast, so he uses this legacy back-channel number he still remembers.
A defunct emergency number for the FBI office in Pierre that has been rerouted.
Exactly. He dials the number and uses the extension 110, which connects him to his former unit, the 110th, and to Susan Turner in Virginia. And he asks for details on an Army facility that looks like a house with 15 huts and a long road.
And the first major correction comes back immediately from Turner. It's Air Force, not Army.
Right.
And what Holland and everyone else in Bolton just thought was a long road.
It's actually a runway, 2 miles long, built with enormous amounts of concrete 50 years ago. The local police chief, Holland, had been looking at a massive disguised airstrip his whole life and only ever saw an ordinary road.
The level of deception is just profound. And the house they mentioned.
It's this strange, heavy stone structure with a slate roof, a total parody of domesticity. It has blind recesses instead of windows, and critically, a massive steel slab door.
A blast door.
A blast door with huge hinges. And Reacher notes that the metal around the keyhole is pristine. There are no nicks or scratches, which means the lock isn't in regular use, but it was recently activated for a specific imminent arrival. And that confirms the conspiracy is historical, and Plato is moving toward its climax.
Okay, let's unpack the core secret here. Turner faxes Reacher the file, detailing the true, bizarre history of this facility. And this is where the story shifts from a crime procedural into full-blown Cold War paranoia. It was built 50 years ago as a combination underground orphanage and radiation shelter.
The history is genuinely chilling, and we need to pause here on the institutional foresight, or lack thereof. This facility wasn't built for soldiers or VIPs. It was based on these terrifying, data-driven casualty predictions.
The assumption being that Soviet missiles would kill all the adults.
Right. Leaving behind this massive population of child survivors with a predicted median age of just 7 years old.
And the sources detail the psychological projections for these survivors. Left alone, without any adult structure, the reports predicted they would inevitably devolve into tribalism, fighting, killing, maybe even cannibalism.
This bunker was simply built to house these feral, orphaned children, keeping them safe from radiation while they just tried to manage the best they could. The irony is just brutal. A shelter built out of fear of post-apocalyptic cannibalism is now being used by a drug cartel.
But the architecture itself is the key to the modern conspiracy. The geology of the area, the schist terrain, its unyielding hard rock, it forced the engineers to make a massive structural compromise.
And that compromise was the critically low ceiling height, only 5 feet 6 inches in the main circular hub and the corridors.
Which is insane.
For any average adult, the space is unusable. Peterson, who is shorter, has to crouch. Reacher, who's much taller, has to practically scoot on his butt to navigate it. The structure was deemed technically acceptable only for, runty, starving children, but unacceptable for anything else.
So that design flaw, driven by geology, inadvertently made it the perfect, discrete storage locker.
Exactly. No one would ever think to look there because no adult operation could logically run from it. And this is the genius and the vulnerability that Plato is exploiting.
But what was stored there, that's the second, even more valuable reveal. The facility wasn't empty. A cargo manifest shows 40 tons of war surplus.
Flown in from WWII bomber bases in the United Kingdom and labeled generically under the code N06BA03, listed as aircrew requirements from Crown Laboratories.
And this is the financial engine of the entire operation. 40 tons of N06BA series. Reacher immediately connects those specific details. This isn't just generic military gear.
No, N06BA03 is the pharmacological code for central nervous system stimulants. Crown Laboratories manufactured World War II-era amphetamine Pervitin or Disoxin. These were the high-potency pep pills used by bomber crews flying these long, dangerous missions deep into Germany.
Sometimes even baked into candy bars for both Allied and German forces.
Right, 40 tons. The amount is just staggering. Peterson estimates it to be nearly 45,000 packs, which would be valued at billions on the street today. Plato had tracked down this vintage cash a year prior using rumor and logic and had begun removing it, using the facility as a secretive, untraceable distribution hub.
You have to think about the economic scale of this. This isn't newly synthesized meth that can be traced back to labs or precursor chemicals. This is untraceable, decades old, high-grade vintage amphetamine.
It's the perfect inventory for a cartel that's trying to generate billions in clean revenue. And the presence of the bikers confirms the local distribution had already started, treating this historic treasure trove as just some disposable regional meth supply.
And just like that, the conspiracy snaps into place. At 7:58 p.m., the escape siren sounds again. This is Plato triggering the crisis plan.
So Holland, the chief, he rushes out in his car to deploy to the perimeter, following his contractual obligation, leaving Janet Salter completely exposed. But Reacher and Peterson know this is the moment of truth.
While Holland speeds away, Reacher and Peterson investigate the facility, and they confirm Holland's complicity by finding the blast door key.
A massive T-shaped key hidden inside a hot paraffin stove in one of the huts. Only Holland, as the local expert, would know that specific hiding spot. With the key, they descend the tight spiral stairwell for 200 feet down to this bizarre, low-ceilinged chamber.
And their flashlights confirm the incredible contents. The chamber is stacked 10 high and 10 deep with yellowing glassine bricks. They estimate 15,000 packs of meth are still there.
Which means about a third of the original 40 tons is still remaining, and that's when Holland arrives downstairs. He hadn't rushed out to follow the crisis plan. He rushed out to establish his cover story.
And Reacher makes the final, devastating deduction. Holland is the corrupt cop. He staged the confrontation with the bikers who were actually relaying Plato's instructions, and he deliberately threw down his gun to give himself a non-suspicious reason to stand still while communicating with them.
And Holland admits his true plan: to immediately announce the massive meth bust on the police radio network. This is the ultimate institutional betrayal.
It's brilliant, cynical, criminal logic. By announcing the discovery of billions in meth, Holland instantly creates 60 suspects.
The entire Bolton police force, all of whom would know about the find and the location. So when he murdered Peterson moments later, he wouldn't be the only viable candidate for the killer. His plan was to blame the death on infighting related to the sudden discovery of this massive wealth. He confirms Peterson's recent promotion was a setup, designed to make his death seem like an internal affair related to the chaos of the sudden bust.
So the crisis plan wasn't just a vulnerability.
It was a distraction, perfectly executed by the highest level of local law enforcement.
Holland's confession is then immediately followed by the first of the great tragedies in this story. Peterson, relieved that the facility was exposed and eager to get home to his family, he leaves. He's momentarily convinced the threat has passed.
He departs around 8:20, and Holland uses this window of opportunity.
Later that night, Peterson is found dead in his idling car in a snowbound parking lot by another officer, Montgomery. The details are chilling.
The driver's window was down, his body sprawled across the front seats. He was shot in the head with a 9mm close-range entry wound right between the eyes. His foot had slipped off the brake, causing the car to just drift into a wall.
He died trying to do the right thing, thinking he had finally impressed Reacher and stabilized the department.
Just a total tragedy.
And Reacher is stranded, but he soon learns the inevitable tragic fate of Janet Salter. Holland, who's now Reacher's hostage and captive, is forced to drive toward the airfield, but Reacher realizes the system failed her fundamentally. The siren wailed, the cops left.
And she was alone, with Holland speeding toward her. Salter is found dead in her library chair, a book in her lap. She was shot in the forehead like a third eye, precisely where Reacher had told her to aim.
And the weapon, a 9mm, the same caliber used on Peterson and the lawyer. The crushing reality is that she died prepared, but she died because she was approached by the one person she was trained to trust, the chief of police.
And this betrayal cuts Reacher deeply. He realizes the lawyer and Peterson were all the way there, completely trusting the person who approached them, a cop they knew. His self-assessment is just devastating. He feels he is a fraud and a fake and a failure.
Because he was there to protect her, and he failed the system, and he failed his own sense of duty.
And that failure, that guilt, it fuels the rest of the operation. Reacher channels his despair directly into decisive aggression. He forces Holland to drive him back toward the airfield, knowing Holland is the key to luring Plato directly to the scene of the crime.
And the scene at the airfield is surreal and climactic. Plato arrives, not in some small private jet, but in a massive Boeing 737 landing on that 2-mile runway.
Plato and his men are instantly suffering. They're shivering violently because of the extreme cold, minus 30 degrees, a shocking contrast to their warm compound near Mexico City.
But Plato's ruthless efficiency, it remains intact despite the cold. He machine guns 2 stolen truck drivers who are just there to refuel the jet to ensure there are no witnesses.
He's described as a miniature tough guy, an NFL linebacker reduced in size, but his violence is absolute and clinical. And Reacher confronts them by dropping his coat and his gear to show he's unarmed, knowing the extreme cold will quickly even the playing field by debilitating Plato's shivering, overconfident men.
And here we get the ultimate motivation reveal, the thing that justifies the billions spent and the lives taken. Reacher, fighting his way through the chaos, realizes the operation is about more than just old amphetamine. Plato is moving more than just meth.
This is the third and final cargo reveal. The chamber, which fire investigators later confirmed through analysis of the ash, contained over 1,000 intact diamonds. These stones were part of the original 40 tons of war surplus, presumably looted or stolen in Europe during the final chaotic days of World War II and just misrouted to the South Dakota bunker as aircrew requirements. This discovery proves the true scale of Plato's ambition. It wasn't just maximizing a drug trade, it was recovering a massive cache of untraceable, multi-billion-dollar WWII loot.
So Reacher focuses entirely on destroying the inventory and the conspirators. He fights Holland, crashing the Chief's Crown Vic into a hut, which traps him there with the deployment of the airbag and the wreckage. And then Reacher gets control of the underground chamber and the jet fuel line.
He uses a stolen pump truck to break the 737's fuel line, intentionally flooding that low-ceiling chamber and the corridors with highly volatile aviation fuel. And this is where the structural flaw of the bunker becomes its undoing. The 5'6" ceiling means the space will fill rapidly, and the air density will be perfectly controlled for what's about to happen.
The final moments are a race. As Reacher scrambles up that 200-foot tight spiral stairwell, one of Plato's men throws a burning flare down the ventilation shaft.
And the conditions are perfect. The confined space, the 2 ventilation shafts creating equal and opposite aerodynamic flows, and the aviation fuel. They combine to create what the sources call a controlled and everlasting explosion.
It blasts toward the center of the Earth like an upside-down rocket.
The power is so immense that NORAD satellites detect the extreme heat signature. They actually believe it to be a missile launcher strike, requiring immediate communication with their Russian counterparts to reassure them that no nuclear missile had been fired from South Dakota. The entire facility is just utterly devastated.
So that one action, that single choice to use the architecture and the jet fuel against the cartel, it took out billions in inventory and the entire command structure.
And the investigation into the blast is as complex as the conspiracy itself. It takes 4 days before the site is cool enough to even inspect. Due to the total destruction and the, absence of any identifiable remains, authorities cannot officially open a homicide investigation for the deaths of Plato, Holland, and their men.
They just vanished.
They find the wreckage of the 737, and 2 of Plato's men who fled died of exposure. But there's a fascinating technical detail that allowed investigators to grasp the scale of the heat.
The diamonds.
The survival of the diamonds, over 1,000 intact ones, it defined the upper temperature limit of the fire. Because diamonds require extremely high specific temperatures to degrade, their survival helped arson investigators simulate the exact physics of that controlled upside-down blast. The meth, the conspirators, all destroyed.
But the personal cost of this knowledge and this decisive action was immense. Peterson died trying to impress Reacher, trying to be a good chief, believing he had solved the problem by bringing Reacher in.
And Janet Salter died because she placed her integrity above her safety. She believed it was her privilege to walk the walk against wickedness, but she was betrayed by the very system she was relying upon.
In the aftermath, the sources say that 2 weeks later, Kim Peterson moves with her children to Sioux Falls. 4 weeks later, Susan Turner is deployed to Afghanistan, and she leaves Reacher's service file behind.
And that file, which Turner had been studying, it detailed a psychological experiment that focused on the recoil reflex in children. It described Reacher as a child who, by age 6, was diving forward aggressively toward a movie screen monster, a switchblade in his hand, while all the other children recoiled in fear. The psychologist theorized he was a genetic freak, naturally devoid of fear.
But the sources reveal Reacher's own correction to that theory. He told Turner that the psychologist got it all wrong. He was not a genetic anomaly.
He clarified that he trained himself out of fear and into aggression. It was an act of will that he performed by age 5. It required this immense solitary effort and self-discipline to fundamentally redefine his own psychological response to danger.
So you, the listener, have just encountered this immense institutional complexity and danger in this deep dive. A flawed crisis plan, a corrupt local cop exploiting it, and a global cartel operating from a bunker that was built for child cannibalism. The established systems laws, police protocols, federal protections, they all failed Salter and Peterson.
The crisis plan was the very instrument used for their execution.
So here's a provocative thought we want to leave you with, based on all the material we've explored today. The source material shows that the moment the system was meant to protect people, it became the delivery mechanism for their death. So faced with unavoidable peril, do you rely on those failed external systems and laws?
Or do you rely on that difficult, solitary, internal act of will to define your own psychological response to confrontation? To shift fear into aggression, the way Reacher trained himself to do?
It's the difference between trusting the structure and trusting yourself, isn't it?
It is. The Cold War bunker, the local police, the federal contract. They all represent a trust in systems that inevitably fail under pressure. When the bomb goes off, literally and metaphorically, the only thing that remains is the choice you've trained yourself to make.
A compelling thought to take with you as you continue exploring new information. Until the next deep dive, stay safe and keep learning.